Welcome back. We have Lori Horton in the studio with us this morning, and she's here to teach us how to make some mini pies. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, just in time. This is probably some things that you might have already in the cabinet.
Yes.
Pretty simple list of ingredients this morning, but as I think it's been really drilled home, if you want to do this, get to the grocery store today.
Yes.
These may be some ingredients that are still left on the shelves too. Maybe they haven't been cleared out, but we're going to start with some things that you can make from scratch, or you can buy pre-made. So you can make this kind of as simple or as complicated as you want it to be.
Okay, awesome.
The base on it is, I'm going to use a puff pastry, and that is just my favorite right now. I'm kind of loving the puff pastry. You could do this with pie dough, even pizza crust, whatever your favorite is, and from scratch or pre-made. I kind of have done a little bit of a test between the frozen puff pastry sheets as opposed to the refrigerated. And honestly, I think I like the refrigerated a little bit better. It's a little easier to work with. It's got a little softer texture, and you don't have to do that weight of thawing and hoping you don't overthaw it where it gets kind of gummy. So this works really, really well. It comes pre-rolled, so it's very simple to work with, and this is not a complicated ingredient to find. It's at any of your grocery stores, whatever your favorite. So we just are going to unroll this, and we're going to lay it out across our cookie or our cupcake pan. But before we lay it on there, we do want to grease it. So I'm going to make it very simple and use our baking spray. You can actually just do this with cooking spray. This isn't as important as some of our recipes where we want to make sure it's the baking spray. But get it in each one of those cups, because we're going to fill every one. And make sure you don't leave the sides.
Yes, that's important.
Very important. We don't want it to stick in there on those edges. But this makes it so nice because you can take that paper, flip it over onto that cupcake pan, and then just peel that away. What we're going to end up doing is actually making 12 little pieces out of this puff pastry dough. So to do that simply, I'm going to take a pizza cutter, and I'm just going to go between the little openings on my pan. And this doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to adjust these a little bit before we start filling them and baking them. We just want to get them into 12 halfway even pieces. And then once you get those cut, you may have to go off the edges just a little bit here. Be very careful if you have a decent pizza cutter. Mine is not. It's just for sweet stuff. But you'll take those apart, and then you want to lay them kind of down in each one of those little cavities. Now, a little bit of kind of a pro tip on this, if you want to get fancy, is you can actually take a second cupcake pan, and we want to spray the bottom of it and actually use that to just press down in the bottom. And that works really well if you're doing these for a big crowd and you really want them to look all nice and perfect. That works great, and you can absolutely do that. It doesn't really dirty the second one too badly. You just have to wash that bottom. But I'm just going to press them down in there nice and even. If you don't have it fully filled either, that's okay. You'll see, I'll show you when we get done, a couple, they still bake nicely even if that pastry isn't perfectly in every little cavern. But once you get those all nice and in there, we're going to move on to our filling. And when we come back, we'll kind of talk about our options on that, how we close all these up, and how long they'll bake.
All right, sounds like a plan. Thanks, Lori. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Lori has been showing us her recipe for some mini pies. Now, what are the next steps?
Okay, so we got our puff pastry all set in there, and I've got a few just ready to go here. We're going to just fill those next. Very simple. And we can use really any kind of pie filling that you want, as long as it's one that's intended to be baked. So you don't want to do like fresh strawberries, something like that. I know everybody probably has their favorites. I'm kind of partial to cherry myself. Some people love the apple. Any of the fruit ones usually are going to be the best. But small cookie scoop here, not the giant one today. And this is just a perfect amount to portion that in there fairly neat. It's still going to go where it wants to go as it bakes, but we want to start out with a pretty nice even amount. And one nice generous size can, most of these are pretty standard, we'll do exactly 12 of these. So that's just a little FYI there. And then you're going to just take your fingers with those pieces of that puff pastry and pinch those corners together on both sides. We're We're just going to make like kind of a little dumpling
Yes.
with that filling. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be tidy, as you can see
So there
here.
can be, some filling coming out of the sides and things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you want a little bit of a gap to show
Yeah.
because you need a little bit of that steam to escape
Sure.
as it bakes, right?
Perfect.
Then the most expensive ingredient that we've probably used so
Right.
far, we're going to have 1 egg here. And I'm just going to beat that up a little bit. It's been setting for just a few minutes. And with my little pastry brush, we want to put a little bit of an egg wash on the top of these before they bake. Now, ideally, if your professional would have remembered to grab some grain sugar this morning, we would sprinkle a little bit of that on top. But
Sure.
nobody's perfect. So we will just pretend like we did that, and it will look really pretty as it bakes, and add a little bit of crunch to the top. On the ones that I did yesterday that are apple, I actually put just a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on
that's always
top.
good, yeah.
Always the perfect combination with that apple. But a little bit of the large grain sugar is
Yeah.
good on any of our other fruit flavors, and it just gives it that little bit of sparkle to the top, a little bit of crunch as it bakes. And then these go in a 400-degree oven
Okay,
for about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, these were exactly 20 minutes last night, and I just baked these in between our segments. Exactly 20 minutes as well. So with this colder temps outside and
Yeah.
this funky humidity, you're usually going to bring that down a little bit. You can always add a couple more minutes if you need to.
Sure.
But what we want to end up with is these really nice golden edges on there.
They look delicious.
And these are just a little bit warm still. They just came out. But you'll see the bottoms will come out
Perfect. Yeah.
really nice and golden. So that's ideal. I have a thing about the bottoms of my goodies. Nobody ever looks at
be
the bottom.
proud.
You should always flip your cookies and things
Yes.
over and show those to the crowd. That's how you know you did a good job. But if you don't get them sealed up, you can see on my tray here, I've got some that kind of popped open. It doesn't matter. They still taste great.
Yes.
But when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a topping for those cherry ones to dress them up a little bit. We'll add some things. We can even throw a little Cool Whip or ice cream in with those. It's
Delicious.
a perfect combination.
All right, Lori, thanks. We'll stick around. We'll be right back. Well, Lori has been showing us her recipe for mini pies, and we're on the last few steps. So what's next, Lori?
Last few steps is just that little final topping. You guys know I can't ever leave anything well enough alone. So these are great just as they come out of the oven. You can absolutely just serve them up like that. They're great to serve warm. They do bake up quickly, and in the cupcake containers, you can have multiple pans ready to go. So if you're doing this for, a little party or anything, it's pretty easy to have them rolling out of the oven and actually be able to serve warm.
Yes.
But as they set for just a little bit, those final touches, as I mentioned on the apple, I actually put a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on top before I baked them. And then this one, as you can see, it cuts so nicely. You get a perfect little distribution of that hunk of pie filling. I drizzled just a little bit of caramel, like ice cream topping on there, and just for that little added touch. But for the cherry, we're gonna make a little glaze here. And all I did was add a little powdered sugar and some heavy whipping cream to my bowl. And I just splashed in a touch of almond extract, because anytime we do cherry,
Right.
almond is always a really good mixture with
Very
that.
delicious.
But a little goes a long way. So a tiny little splash there, and just get it to a nice consistency where it will pour. So a little bit of powdered sugar, and then just kind of add that whipping cream until you get the consistency that you want. And then while these are just a little bit warm, we're going to drizzle a little bit of that over the top. And again, with the cherry, it's not that it's not sweet enough,
Right.
but we want to add just a little bit extra. And I think
course.
a good visual here is you had asked me about the difference in the pastry, and we talked earlier about using the frozen puff pastry dough versus the
Right.
refrigerated. And you can really see on my
Yeah.
two ones here, the ones that I made last night, I did with the frozen puff pastry, and the ones I did this morning are with the refrigerated. And this just puffs up a little
Yeah, the
bit
other
more.
one looks a little more dense.
Exactly. It's a little bit thicker. It's just a little bit more dense. It still tastes delicious. It's got a really flaky texture, but you get a little more lightness, I think, from the refrigerated, and it's a little easier to work with because you don't have to deal with that thawing process
Right.
with it. So it's just personal preference, and you can make that from scratch. We've got some time on our hands coming up
We
the next
certainly
couple
do.
days, right? So absolutely do that. But we're just going to drizzle a little bit of that glaze on our cherry ones here. Don't go overboard, because again, a little goes a long ways. They are already sweet. but that just adds that little bit of dressing to the top.
And again, Danish.
Exactly, it kind of is, and it gets that little bit of almond flavor in there. Which is just the perfect mixture with the cherry. But of course, the blueberry topping,
Yes.
any of your pie fillings are going to go well with that. About that same size scoop. And you can even do these in the mini cupcake pans.
Oh, sure.
They'll bake a little bit less. Obviously, lay your pastry on there and cut your squares the same so that they pinch up evenly. But really no difference except for just the size and of what you put in there. So you can kind of customize these a little bit, more kid-sized treats that way.
Absolutely, how fun. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lori. As always, we'll of course have this recipe later on our website, koamnewsnow.com. Stick around, we'll be right back.